The rain came down hard that Tuesday night. Not the soft kind that makes Seoul look like a painting. The kind that empties streets. The kind that makes people run. Kamsi didn't run. She stood at the door of Miso house, one hand resting on the frame, and watched the water hit the pavement outside like she had nowhere else to be. Like she owned the place.
She did.
Nobody knew that. Not the regulars who called her by name and tipped generously. Not the kitchen staff who respected her without fully understanding why. Not the young hostess who assumed the owner was the quiet older Korean man whose name appeared on the early paperwork. Just Kamsi. And her lawyer. And a document signed 3 days ago that made it official, final, and completely hers. She had waited 7 years for that piece of paper. 7 years of washing dishes and waiting tables and watching and learning and saving and building and holding her breath. 3 days. That was how long she had before he walked in. The car was the kind that doesn't make noise. Black. Low. Moving through the rain like it had already decided where it was going, and the rest of the world was just scenery. It stopped in front of Miso house at 9:47 in the evening, 40 minutes before closing, and nobody inside knew yet that everything was about to change. Park Jin stood in the rain for exactly 4 seconds. He looked up at the sign above the door. Miso house. The lettering warm and hand-painted, the kind of sign a person chooses because they care about how something feels, not just how it reads. He noted it, filed it, walked inside. Miso house on a Tuesday night was exactly what Kamsi had designed it to be.
Warm.
Unhurried. The kind of place where the food arrived before you remembered you were hungry, and the noise level was exactly loud enough that you could have a private conversation without trying. She had spent 4 months getting the lighting right alone. 4 months of moving fixtures, changing bulbs, adjusting angles, until the amber was exactly the shade that made every face in the room look like something worth knowing. Until people walked in and immediately felt like they had been somewhere good before, even if they hadn't. That was the trick, she always said, to the empty kitchen after closing when there was no one to say it to. Make people feel like they already belong here. She moved through the dining room the way she always did, like water finding its level. Plates down, eye contact, smile that meant it, move on. She had a system. Every table got checked in a specific order. Every guest got seen once fully before they had to ask for anything. She could tell within 30 seconds of a table sitting down whether they needed warmth or space, whether they were celebrating something or recovering from something, whether they wanted her to talk or disappear. She always chose correctly, not because she was performing, because she was genuinely paying attention. That was the part nobody ever credited her for. Not the cooking, not the business, the attention, the relentless, exhausting, completely invisible work of caring about every single person who walked through that door. That was what built Miso house. Not the money, not the paperwork.
That.
He chose the corner table without being asked. Hyun-jo pulled out his chair, scanned the room once with the particular efficiency of someone whose job is to know where the exits are, and sat down beside him. Park Jin didn't look at the menu. He looked at the room. The ceiling height. The kitchen layout visible through the pass. The spacing between tables. The quality of the fixtures. The building bones beneath the careful warmth of the decoration. He was calculating square footage. He was calculating what the space would look like empty. She noticed him the way she noticed everything. Not with a reaction, with a registration. New guests. Corner table. Didn't ask for menus. Didn't look at the specials board. One of them was watching the room like he owned it. She had seen that look before. She picked up her notepad and walked over. Good evening. Her Korean was clean and unhurried. Can I start you both with something to drink? Park Jin looked up at her for the first time. Something shifted in his expression, gone before it fully formed. Water, he said. She wrote nothing. She never needed to write water. Of course. She looked at Hyun-jo. He shook his head once. She nodded and turned back toward the kitchen, and neither man said anything until she was 3 tables away. Then Hyunjo leaned slightly forward. That's the waitress. She's been here 6 years according to the staff records. No ownership connection. Clean. Park Jin watched her move through the room. Order something, he said. We're going to be here a while. After closing, when the last guest had gone and the kitchen staff had cleaned down and left, Kamsi stayed. She always stayed. Not because there was work left. Because this was the only hour of the day when Miso House was completely hers. No performance. No system. No carefully calibrated warmth deployed in service of someone else's experience. Just her. And the kitchen. And the particular silence of a place that had been full of life and was now resting. She had a ritual. She walked every table. She straightened chairs that didn't need straightening. She stood behind the host station for 30 seconds and looked at the whole room. And every night she said the same thing, quietly, to nobody. Still here. She said it the night Park Jin came in. She said it the night after, when Hyunjo returned alone and asked to speak to the owner and was told, politely, that the owner was unavailable. She said it the night the letter arrived. The letter was 3 paragraphs long. The first paragraph introduced John Capital as the new owner of the building at the registered address, following a completed acquisition from the previous landlord. The second paragraph noted that the existing commercial lease for the tenant operating as Miso House would not be renewed upon its expiration in 30 days, and that the tenant was kindly requested to vacate the premises by that date. The third paragraph expressed appreciation for the tenants' patronage and wished them well in their future endeavors. 3 paragraphs. Just a stamp. Just the name of a company she had never heard of. Kamsi read it twice. Then she set it down on the desk, very carefully, the way you set something down when you are deciding how to feel about it before you let yourself feel anything at all. She picked up her phone, called her lawyer. I need you to tell me everything you know about a company called John Capital, she said. Tonight. The silence on the other end lasted just long enough to tell her everything she needed to know about how serious this was. Kamsi, her lawyer said. Where did you see that name? She was up until 4 in the morning. John Capital. Registered in Seoul, 14 years ago. Commercial real estate holdings across 5 districts. A portfolio of acquired properties that read, on paper, like aggressive but legal development investment. On paper. What wasn't on paper was what her lawyer told her in a low voice at midnight. That John Capital was the legitimate face of the John Network. That the John Network controlled a significant portion of Mapo's commercial district through a combination of bought landlords, pressure tenants, and very patient legal maneuvering. That the businesses that fought John Capital acquisitions had a specific pattern of outcomes, none of them good, and that the man currently heading John Capital's operations, a man named Park Jin, was not someone who sent letters twice. Kamsi closed her laptop. She sat in the dark for a long moment. Then she opened it again. Because if he wasn't going to send the letter twice, she needed to have her answer ready before he sent anything else. If you are watching this, drop your district in the comments. Because this story is about to get very specific about what happens in these streets when someone decides you don't belong somewhere you built with your own hands. He came back on a Thursday, 11 in the morning, before the lunch service. The hostess at the door was a 22-year-old named Ji-yeon who had worked at Miso House for 8 months and who had a very accurate instinct for when a situation required her to go find Kamsi immediately. She went to find Kamsi immediately. Kamsi was in the kitchen doing prep. She wiped her hands on a clean cloth. She straightened her apron. She walked out. Park Jin was standing in the middle of the dining room, hands in his pockets, looking at the ceiling, like he was already measuring. She felt something cold move through her. She kept her face completely still. Mr. Park. She said it like she had been expecting him, because she had. Can I help you?
He turned.
That slight shift in his expression again.
There and gone.
I'd like to speak with the owner, he said. She held his gaze. Steady.
Warm.
Professionally impenetrable. I'm afraid the owner is unavailable this morning, she said. Is there something I can help you with? Something moved behind his eyes. Not suspicion yet, just recalibration. "Tell the owner," he said, "that John Capital would like to discuss the transition timeline. We prefer to make these things comfortable for everyone involved." She smiled, the kind of smile that gave away absolutely nothing. "I'll pass that along," she said. "Can I get you anything before you go? The kitchen is already running." He looked at her for a moment that lasted slightly too long. "No," he said. He turned and walked out. Hyunjo followed.
The door closed.
Ji-yeon appeared at Kamsi's elbow immediately. "Who was that?" "Nobody," Kamsi said. "Get the lunch mise en place started. We open in an hour." She went back to the kitchen. She picked up her prep knife. She set it down again. She needed to make a call. Her lawyer's name was Cho-sun Hee, and she had been Kamsi's lawyer since year 2, when the original silent partnership paperwork needed someone who understood both Ghanaian inheritance documentation and Korean commercial law and was willing to work on a payment plan. She answered on the second ring. "He came in person," Kamsi said.
A pause.
Park Jin himself. "This morning, before service." He asked to speak to the owner. Another pause, longer. "What did you say?" "That the owner was unavailable." "Son," he made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "Good.
Keep saying that.
Every time. Don't let him know yet." "How long can I keep that up?" "Long enough. I've been looking into the building acquisition. The sale from your previous landlord to John Capital. There are irregularities. Nothing that will stop them permanently, but enough to slow down the eviction timeline significantly if we file the right challenge." Kamsi exhaled. "How long? If we file today, I can get you 90 days instead of 30. 90 days. She looked at the framed photograph on the wall of her office. It was the only personal thing in a room. A photograph of Miso House taken from across the street on the night it opened. The lights warm and golden. The street empty. Her own silhouette barely visible in the doorway. She had taken it herself with a timer because there was nobody else there that night. "File today," she said. Director Lim heard about the legal challenge on a Friday morning, and he set down his pen very carefully on his desk. He had been in this business for 22 years. He had overseen 47 property acquisitions. He had never had a tenant file a legal challenge. Not because tenants didn't have grounds. Because tenants understood after a certain kind of conversation that having grounds and being willing to use them were two entirely different things. Someone had filed anyway. He picked up his phone and called Park Jin. Park Jin answered on the third ring, which was already one ring too many in Lim's system of preferences. "The Miso House tenant filed," Lim said. "Who is it?" "A waitress, according to the staff records," Park Jin said. "No ownership documentation on file. The legal challenge was filed by the owner of record." Lim's eyes narrowed further. "Then someone is hiding behind the owner of record. Find out who." "I'll look into it," Park Jin said. "Don't look into it," Lim said. "Resolve it." In the car, Hyunjo pulled up everything they had. The registered owner of record for Miso House is a man named Song Dae-woo, 61. Retired chef. No criminal record, no financial irregularities, no current active income. The restaurant has been operating under his name since it opened 7 years ago. Park Jin watched the city move past the window. And the waitress? Kamsi. No surname registered in the business documentation. Ghanaian national. Work visa, clean record. Arrived in Seoul 8 years ago. Listed as senior serving staff. No ownership connection in any document we can find. A silence. "She speaks like someone who runs something," Park Jin said. Hyunjo looked at him. "Sir, the way she talks to the room, the way she moves." He paused. "She's not a waitress." Hyunjo looked back at his phone. "The documents say otherwise." "Then the documents are wrong." He turned from the window. "Find Song Dae-woo." Sarah Park had been Kamsi's best friend for 5 years. Since the afternoon Kamsi had served her the wrong order, realized it, and brought her the right one plus the wrong one with a note that said, "Keep both. One is an apology, and one is a recommendation. Sarah had eaten both, left a note back that said, "The recommendation was better," and returned the following week. She was the only person in Seoul, outside of Sun-hee, who knew what Kamsi actually owned. "How bad is it?" Sarah asked, wrapping both hands around her coffee cup. "Bad enough that my lawyer used the word careful 3 times in one phone call," Kamsi said. Sarah's eyes went wide. "Son, he never says careful." "Exactly." A silence between them. Sarah looked down at her cup, then back up. "What are you going to do?" Kamsi turned her own cup slowly in her hands. It meant she had already decided, and was just deciding whether to say it out loud. "I'm going to let him keep thinking I'm the waitress," she said, "for as long as I possibly can." Sarah stared at her. "Kamsi, he's making decisions based on wrong information, Sarah. Every day he thinks I'm just Af is a day I get to watch him from a position he doesn't know I have. And when he finds out," Kamsi set her cup down. "By the time he finds out," she said quietly, "I'll have already won. I need to know something before this goes further. Drop in the comments. Do you think Kamsi is right to hide what she owns? Or is she making a mistake that's going to cost her everything?" Because both arguments are about to make a lot of sense. They found Song Dae-woo at his apartment in Yongdongpo on a Wednesday afternoon. He was a gentleman, a retired chef who had spent 30 years in restaurant kitchens and retired to a small apartment full of cookbooks and a single excellent knife he no longer used. He had agreed to be the registered owner of Miso House 8 years ago because Kamsi had asked him to, because she had been the most serious young cook he had ever trained, and because he understood without her explaining it that a young black African woman trying to register a business in Seoul needed a Korean name on the paperwork if she wanted the process to take less than a decade. He had never taken a single one he wasn't owed. He was also not a man who was easily frightened. But when Hyun-jo sat across from him and explained, in a very pleasant voice, that John Capital was simply trying to clarify the ownership structure of the Miso House lease, something in Song Dae-woo's eyes went very still. He called Kamsi from the bathroom of the apartment while Hyun-jo waited in the kitchen. She answered on the first ring. "They found me," he said quietly. "Don't say anything," she said. "Not a single word about anything. Tell them you need to speak to your lawyer before you discuss the lease." "Kamsi, these people. I know who they are, Dae-woo. I know exactly who they are." Her voice was very calm. "Trust me." He went back to the kitchen. He sat down across from Hyun-jo. He folded his hands on the table again. "I'll need to speak to my lawyer," he said, "before I discuss anything about the lease." Hyun-jo looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled pleasantly and stood up. "Of course," he said. "Take your time." He came back that evening, not with Hyun-jo, alone. He stood across the street and looked at Miso House the way he had been trained to look at properties. Square footage, location value, demolition cost versus renovation cost. But something kept pulling his eye to the sign. Hand-painted, slightly imperfect lettering. The kind of thing you commission from a person, not a company. The kind of thing you choose because you want it to look like someone cared, not because it's the most efficient option. He had overseen 43 property acquisitions in 4 years with John Capital. He had walked into 43 spaces with this same assessment in his eyes. He had never stood across the street from one for this long. He went inside. He sat at the corner table again. She brought water, without being asked. This time, when she set the glass down and their eyes met, neither of them looked away immediately. "You're back," she said. "The food was good," he said. It was not entirely a lie. It was also not entirely the reason. She handed him the menu. He took it without looking at it. "The owner," he said carefully. "Has the message been passed along?" Her expression didn't change. Not a flicker. "It has," she said. "The owner is in consultation with their legal team." He looked at her. Really looked. The way he had in the car, the thing he had said to Hyun-jo rising back to the surface. "She's not a waitress." "What's your name?" he asked. Brief. Controlled. "Kamsi," she said. "Kamsi." He said it back like he was checking the weight of it. How long have you worked here? Long enough, she said pleasantly. Can I take your order? Lim summoned him on a Thursday. Not a request, a summons. The private room at the back of a Mapo members club where Lim held meetings he didn't want documented.
Dark paneling.
One overhead light. The particular silence of a room designed to make people feel accountable. Lim didn't offer him a seat. He let him stand for a moment before gesturing to the chair. Park Jin sat. 23 days, Lim said. The original deadline was 30. 7 days gone, and a legal challenge filed. Explain that. The filing was anticipated, Park Jin said. It buys them 60 additional days at most. It doesn't change the outcome. Lim tapped his pen once against the table.
Slowly.
It changes the timeline. We have investors watching the Mapo consolidation. Every delay signals weakness. He leaned forward slightly. I told you to resolve this. Not manage it. Resolve it. Park Jin held his gaze. I'm working on identifying the actual decision-maker behind the lease. The registered owner is a front. When I find the real owner, the conversation will move faster. Lim's eyes narrowed. And if the real owner is as difficult as the front? The silence stretched. Then we make being difficult more expensive than being reasonable, Lim said. He sat back. Whatever it takes.
Park Jin said nothing.
Whatever it takes, Lim said again, quieter. The repetition was the point. She walked the neighborhood every morning before service. Not for exercise. For intelligence. She had been doing it for 3 years. Learning which businesses were struggling, which were expanding, who the landlords were, what the rent patterns looked like, which streets were about to change. She understood Mapo's commercial geography better than most people who had lived there their entire lives. What she was seeing now on her morning walks was a pattern she had been watching build for 18 months. John Capital was not just after her building. They were building something. A contiguous block of commercial properties running through the heart of Mapo's most trafficked streets. Miso House sat at the exact center of that block. Without it, the line of acquired properties had a gap. With it, John Capital controlled an unbroken stretch of street-level retail that could be developed into something enormous. She was not just a tenant to be removed. She was the keystone. And nobody had told Park Jin that yet. Which meant either he didn't know, or he was choosing not to tell her, which told her something important about where his loyalties actually sat within his own organization. She filed that observation carefully. Then she went to open the restaurant. Son, he spread the documents across her desk and tapped the one in the center. This is the original sale agreement between your previous landlord and John Capital. And this, she tapped a second document, is the valuation that was used to justify the sale price. Kamsi leaned forward. What am I looking at? The building was sold at 30% below its assessed market value, which on its own could be explained as a motivated seller. Except that the previous landlord, Mr. Beck, applied for a commercial loan against the building's full market value 6 months before the sale. Kamsi looked up. He needed cash. He needed cash urgently, and John Capital provided it. And then when the loan came due, he couldn't pay, and they converted the debt to ownership. Son, he took her glasses off her head and set them on the desk. It's legal.
Barely.
But there's a specific clause in the original tenancy agreement Mr. Beck signed with you, a right of first refusal on any sale of the building. Kamsi went very still. He was supposed to offer it to me first. He was contractually obligated to. He didn't. Son, he looked at her directly. Which means the sale to John Capital can be challenged. Not reversed, probably, but challenged in a way that requires them to either honor the right of first refusal going forward or compensate you significantly for its violation. The room was very quiet. How significant?
Kamsi asked.
Son, he named a number. Kamsi sat back in her chair. That's enough to buy a building, she said. Yes, son, he said. It is. Can we just stop for a second? Because what they did to Mr. Beck, what they've been doing to every small business owner in that neighborhood, is not just illegal. It is a system. A deliberate, patient, calculated system for taking things from people who built them. And the fact that it is barely legal is the entire point. Drop a comment if this is making your blood boil. Because it should. Hyun-jo found it on a Saturday. A final ownership transfer document buried in a filing at the Seoul Commercial Registry. A transfer of shares from Songdae-woo to a Seoul owner, registered 3 weeks ago. Stamped, witnessed, fully legal. The new registered owner of Miso House was listed as Kamsi. Hyun-jo brought it to Park Jin at 11 at night. Park Jin read it once. Then again. Then he set it down. He sat very still for a long time. She had been the owner the entire time. Every conversation, every water glass, every politely deflected question about who was in charge. She had been standing in front of him, in her apron, carrying his water, knowing everything he was doing, and he had looked at her and seen a waitress. He had looked at her and seen exactly what she had decided to show him. The particular thing that moved through him in that moment was not anger. It was something more uncomfortable than anger. It was the recognition that he had made an assumption so basic, so unexamined, that he had never even identified it as an assumption. He had assumed she couldn't own it. He had never asked himself why he assumed that. He had just assumed it and built every calculation on top of it and been entirely wrong. He picked up his phone, put it back down. He looked at the document for another long moment. Then he said, very quietly, to the empty office, "She built the whole thing." She came in early that Sunday morning, before anyone else, before the delivery, before Ji-yeon, before the kitchen team. She unlocked the door with her own key, the key she had been carrying for 7 years, the one that had been cut from the original before Songdae-woo ever had his name on any document, because she had always known that this was hers even when the paperwork said otherwise. She stood in the middle of the empty dining room. She looked at the ceiling she had repainted herself the second summer, when the original color wasn't quite right. She looked at the copper fixtures she had sourced from 3 different suppliers across 2 countries. She looked at the floor she had resanded and refinished by hand one long August weekend when the restaurant was closed for a water repair. Every surface in this room had her hands on it. Every choice in this room was hers. She had never been just a waitress. Not for a single day of her life. She sat down at the nearest table. Just sat. In her restaurant. In the morning quiet. And for the first time since the letter arrived, she let herself be afraid. Not because she thought she would lose. Because she understood, sitting in the room she had built with 7 years of her life, what losing would actually mean. She sat with that for exactly 2 minutes. Then she got up and started the coffee. He came alone on Sunday morning. No car. Just Park Jin, walking up the street in a dark coat, looking at a restaurant sign like it owed him something. Ji-yeon opened the door for him before he could knock. She gave him the look she had developed specifically for his visits, part professional courtesy, part quiet alarm, and went immediately to find Kamsi. Kamsi came out from the kitchen. She saw immediately that he was alone. She saw immediately that something was different. She didn't let herself react to either observation. "Mr. Park," she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "I know." 2 words. She felt them land precisely. She held his gaze. The warmth in her expression didn't change. But something behind it shifted, the particular shift of a person who has been holding something back for a long time and has just been given permission to set it down. "Know what?" she said. He looked at her steadily. "That you own this restaurant. That you have always owned this restaurant. That every conversation we have had, you have been the person I needed to be talking to." The dining room was very still around them. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Sit down." She made 2 coffees. She set one in front of him and sat down with the other. They looked at each other across the table. "You should have told me from the beginning," he said. "You would have treated me differently," she said. "Not better. Differently. I needed to see how you operated before I decided what to do with you." He looked at her. "And what did you decide?" She turned her coffee cup slowly in her hands. That you're not what your organization is, she said. That the Miso House acquisition is not something you chose. And that the reason it's taking this long is not incompetence. It's reluctance. Something moved across his face. Gone quickly. You've been watching me, he said. I've been watching everything, she said. For 7 years. It's how I'm still here. A silence. The morning light moved slightly as a cloud passed outside. What do you want? He asked. Not the organizational version of the question. The real one. She looked at him directly. I want to keep my restaurant, she said. And I think you want something too. Something that has nothing to do with acquiring my building. He was very still. Tell me, she said, what John Capital is actually building in Mapo. Not the official version. The real one. Another silence. Longer. He picked up his coffee, set it down without drinking. Then he told her, John Capital was not building a commercial development. They were building a consolidation. A single controlling entity that owned enough of Mapo's commercial street-level property to dictate rent structures across the entire neighborhood. Not develop it. Control it. The way you control a water supply, by owning the pipes. Every independent business in the affected zone, every restaurant, every shop, every service, would eventually be paying rent to the same organization. And an organization that controls rent controls survival. It was not illegal. That was the genius of it. It was just a large-scale real estate investment strategy that happened to function exactly like a stranglehold. And Lim had been building it for 8 years.
Quietly, patiently.
Using John Capital as the vehicle and the network's resources as the engine. Miso House was the last piece. Park Jin had known for 6 months what Lim was really building. He had been trying to find a way to stop it from inside without triggering the kind of conflict that would bring everything down at once. He had been redirecting, delaying, quietly killing other acquisitions, buying time. But Miso House was personal to Lim. He had chosen it himself. And Park Jin had run out of ways to stall. Until now. He looked across the table at the woman who had been invisible to him until 48 hours ago. The right of first refusal, he said. If your lawyer pursues it, the challenge could expose the methodology Lim used across every acquisition in the zone. Not just yours. Kamsi looked at him very carefully. You want me to go wider, she said. I want you to have grounds, he said. What you do with them is your decision. She looked at him for a long time. Why, she said. He held her gaze. Because this neighborhood is full of people who built things, he said. And someone has been systematically taking those things from them for 8 years. A pause. I helped. I didn't start it, but I helped, and I'm trying to figure out how to stop. The morning light sat between them, still and gold. Before this goes any further, I need you to predict something in the comments. Does Kamsi trust him? Does she use what he just gave her? Or does she decide that a man who helped build the machine is not someone she can afford to believe, no matter what he says now? Drop your prediction because the next 3 minutes are going to split the room. Son, he filed the expanded challenge on a Tuesday morning. Not just the right of first refusal violation on Miso House. A full challenge to the methodology John Capital had used across 11 properties in the Mapo zone over 8 years, using the financial irregularities in the Miso House acquisition as the template and applying it to every transaction where the same pattern of emergency loans and debt-to-ownership conversions appeared. 11 cases. 11 violations of similar tenancy protections. 11 sets of affected business owners who had never been told they had rights they could have exercised. The filing hit the Seoul Commercial Court at 9:45 in the morning. By 11, 3 other lawyers representing 3 other affected businesses had called Sun He's office asking to join the challenge. By 2 in the afternoon, a legal journalist had gotten hold of the filing summary. By 4, John Capital's legal team had sent a settlement offer. Kamsi read it at her desk in the back office of Miso House. She read it twice. It was generous. Genuinely generous. A significant financial settlement for the right of first refusal violation, a guaranteed 10-year lease at a controlled rate, and a formal acknowledgement that the original eviction notice was being withdrawn. She could stop here. She had won. By any practical measure, she had won. She called Sun Hee. "Is this real?" she said. "The settlement is real," Sun Hee said. "But Kamsi, it only covers you. The other 11 businesses, they're still exposed. The settlement terms would require us to withdraw the wider challenge." A silence. "They're buying my silence," Kamsi said. "They're buying the most effective voice in the challenge," Sun Hee said quietly. "Because the Miso house case is the strongest. If you go, the others weaken." Another silence. "What does Park Jin know about this offer?"
Kamsi asked. Sun Hee paused.
"I don't know." Lim had authorized the settlement personally. It was, he felt, the elegant solution. The woman was smart. Smart people understood value. Give her something significant, something she could not reasonably refuse, and the whole inconvenient legal challenge would collapse quietly and the Mapo consolidation could proceed. He had been doing this for 22 years. He understood how people worked. Everyone had a number. He picked up his pen, held it, set it down. He thought briefly about Park Jin, about the fact that Park Jin had not called him when the expanded filing hit the court, about the fact that the expanded filing contained details about the acquisition methodology that only someone inside John Capital would know to look for. He filed that thought carefully. He would deal with it after the settlement was signed. He was waiting outside when she came out. She stopped when she saw him, looked at him for a moment. "You knew about the settlement offer," she said. "Not a question." "I didn't authorize it," he said. "But you knew." "Lim authorized it directly," he said. "I found out an hour ago." She looked at him steadily. "Did you tell him about the expanded filing?" Something crossed his face. Controlled anger. Turned inward. "No," he said. Then how did he know to structure the settlement to require withdrawal of the wider challenge? He said nothing, which was its own answer. Lim had been around long enough to anticipate the strategy without being told. She looked at him for a long moment. "I'm not taking it," she said. He looked at her. "Kamsi." "I'm not taking it." Quieter now, but completely certain. "If I take that settlement, 11 businesses lose the strongest case they have. People who were taken advantage of the same way I was, most of them without the legal resources I have, lose their chance because I decided my restaurant was more important." He was very still. "The offer is good," he said carefully. "If you reject it, Lim will escalate. He won't use lawyers." She held his gaze. "I know," she said. "You understand what that means." "I've understood what that means since the first letter arrived." She looked at him directly. "The question is whether you're going to be on the right side of what comes next." The evening sat between them. Lim's response to the rejected settlement arrived the following Monday. Not another letter. A health and safety inspection notice, posted on the door of Miso House at 6 in the morning, before service, citing 17 code violations requiring immediate inspection and potentially ordering temporary closure pending review. Then a call to Kamsi's supplier network. 2 of her 3 main food suppliers received what they described as a friendly inquiry from a company called John Capital about their delivery schedules and client lists. Both suppliers called Kamsi within the hour, frightened, apologetic, explaining that they might need to pause deliveries while they clarified the situation. Then a social media account appeared, anonymous, posting a series of photographs of Miso House's kitchen with unverified claims about food safety practices. The photographs were clearly staged. Nobody cared. Within 6 hours, it had been shared enough times that 2 regular customers emailed asking if everything was all right. It was a coordinated campaign. Professional. Efficient. The kind of pressure that was designed not to break something all at once, but to make running it so exhausting, so relentlessly expensive in time and energy and emotional labor, that the target simply stopped. Kamsi called Sarah. Sarah came immediately. They sat in the closed kitchen at 9 in the morning surrounded by the things the health inspector had flagged, none of which were actual violations, all of which would require documented responses and re-inspections and legal correspondence and time. Okay, Sarah said, looking at the list. Then looking at Kamsi. How are you? Kamsi looked around her kitchen. I'm tired, she said.
Honest. Direct.
The kind of tired that has nothing to do with sleep. Sarah reached across and put her hand over Kamsi's on the table.
Still here though, she said.
Kamsi looked at her. Something in her expression broke open, very briefly. Then she pulled it back together. Still here, she said. She stayed in the kitchen after Sarah left. She stood with both hands on the counter for a long time. She thought about Ghana, about the partner who had stolen her first restaurant concept before it opened, about the specific way he had smiled when he told her she was overreacting, that she had misunderstood the agreement, that nobody would believe her version over his because his name was on the paperwork and hers wasn't. He had been right about one thing. Nobody had believed her. She had come to Seoul because she needed to be somewhere that didn't already know her name as a story that ended badly. She had built Miso House in silence because she understood that the most powerful protection she could have was the one that nobody knew she needed. She had been right. She was still right. But right and safe were two different things. And she was standing in a kitchen that might be closed by the end of the week through a process entirely designed to exhaust her into surrender, and she was doing it alone. And she was tired. She lifted her head. She picked up her phone. She called Park Jin. He answered on the first ring. Lim sent the inspection notice, she said. I know. His voice was very controlled. I'm handling it.
How?
Then, carefully. There's a board-level meeting at John Capital next week. The expanded legal challenge, if it's still active by then, creates a fiduciary liability that the board cannot ignore. Lim has been operating outside his mandate on the Mapo consolidation. If I bring the evidence to the board before the challenge is resolved, his position becomes untenable. She was quiet for a moment. You're going to move against him, she said. I'm going to give the board the information they need to move against him, he said. There's a difference. Is there? Kamsi, I need the challenge to stay active for 7 more days. Can you hold on for 7 days? She looked around her kitchen, at every surface that had her hands on it. I've been holding on for 7 years, she said. The board meeting happened on a Wednesday. Park Jin had sent the documents to 3 board members the night before. Not the full package. Enough. A summary of the Mapo acquisition methodology, with the financial irregularities documented, the right of first refusal violations cataloged, and the total legal liability the company was now carrying as a result of the expanded challenge. He had attached one additional document. A record of 8 months of acquisition redirections he had carried out on his own authority, with a formal recommendation that the board conduct an internal review of all Mapo transactions authorized under Director Lim's direct oversight. Lim arrived at the meeting not knowing. He found out when the board chair opened with it. He looked at Park Jin. Park Jin looked back at him. His one finger tapped once.
Slowly.
On the table.
Gone.
Lim straightened up, fully composed, the composure of a man who had survived worse. This is a coordinated attack, he said, to the room, not to Park Jin. From someone who has been systematically undermining our operational strategy for 8 months. The real question this board should be asking. The board chair raised one hand. Lim stopped. Director Lim, the chair said, you will be placed on administrative suspension pending the internal review. The board has authorized a settlement with all affected parties, Park Jin said. Full acknowledgement. Compensatory amounts based on the right of first refusal valuations. Miso House too? Miso House most of all. Lim will fight the suspension, Hyunjo said. Yes. Park Jin kept looking at the city. He'll fight it, and he'll probably survive it in some reduced form. But he won't be running the Mapo consolidation anymore. And the consolidation won't survive the legal exposure.
He paused.
It's not everything. but it's enough to stop this particular thing. Another silence. What happens to you?
Hyun-jo asked.
Park Jin looked at the city. At Mapo, visible in the middle distance if you knew where to look. At the streets where people had built things and where something patient and systematic had been trying to take those things away. I have some decisions to make, he said. If you have made it this far into the story, you already know this channel is not like the others. We build these stories from the ground up. Every detail, every character, every piece of what makes a human being fight for what they built. Hit subscribe right now and hit the bell, because the next story is already being built and you do not want to arrive after it has already started. Son, he called at 3 in the afternoon. John Capital has authorized a full settlement, she said. All 11 affected businesses. Right of first refusal compensation. Lease protections. Formal withdrawal of all eviction proceedings. Kamsi stood very still in the middle of her dining room. All 11, she said. All 11. Yours and every other business that joined the challenge. A silence. The inspection notices? Kamsi said. Withdrawn. And the social media account was traced and reported. It's down. Another silence. Is it real?
Kamsi said.
Which was what she always asked when something came through after a long fight.
As if she needed to check.
It's real, son, he said. It's done. Kamsi lowered her phone. She stood in the middle of her dining room, in the restaurant she had built with 7 years of her hands and her attention and her refusal to disappear, and she looked at the room the way she had looked at it the morning she was afraid. Except this was not afraid. This was the other thing. The thing on the other side of afraid. She walked to the nearest table, and she straightened a chair that didn't need straightening. And very quietly, to nobody, she said it. Still here. Sarah arrived 20 minutes after the call. She came through the door, looked at Kamsi's face, and crossed the room in 4 steps and wrapped both arms around her. Kamsi stood very still for a moment in the embrace. Then she put one arm around Sarah's shoulders. All 11? Sarah said into her shoulder. All 11. Sarah made a sound that was half laugh, half something else. They stood like that for a moment in the middle of the dining room. I told you, Sarah said, pulling back, her eyes bright. I told you from the beginning. You told me to be careful, Kamsi said. I told you to be careful and that you were going to win, Sarah said. Both were correct. Kamsi laughed. A real one. The kind that came from somewhere deep and surprised her slightly. If this story hit you the way I think it hit you, share it with someone right now. Not for the numbers. Because someone in your life needs to see what it looks like when someone decides that what they built is worth fighting for. Share it. They'll thank you later. He came that evening. She was waiting outside, actually, closing a delivery order on her phone when his car pulled up. He got out alone, as he always did now when he came here. They stood on the pavement outside Miso House. The city moved around them. It's done, he said. I know, she said. Son, he called. A pause. The 11 businesses, she said. The people behind them. Most of them don't know how this happened or who made it happen. They'll get their settlements and never know your name was part of why. He looked at her. That's fine, he said. She looked at him for a long time. What are you going to do now? She said. He looked up at the Miso House sign. The hand-painted letters warm in the evening light. There's an opening on the Commercial Development Regulatory Board, he said. Independent advisory position. Reviewing acquisition practices in Seoul's mid-tier commercial districts. Someone should probably be doing that job, who understands from the inside how the process gets abused. She looked at him. He looked at her. That's a very boring job description for what you're actually planning to do, she said. Something shifted in his expression. The stripped-back version of him. The one that looked 10 years younger. Yes, he said. It is. She almost smiled. Not quite. Come inside, she said. Service starts in 40 minutes. You can have a proper meal this time. Not water. He looked at her for a moment. You're going to keep being the waitress, he said. I'm going to keep running my restaurant, she said. Exactly the way I choose to run it. She turned and walked through the door. He stood on the pavement for a moment. Then he followed. She stayed after closing the way she always did. She walked the tables. She straightened chairs. She stood behind the host station and looked at the whole room. Miso house.
Still here.
But something had changed. She had won. She knew that. The settlement was real. The eviction was gone. The restaurant was hers in the fullest and most protected sense it had ever been. And yet, sitting in her office after the walk, she opened the folder he had sent her that afternoon. Not the settlement documents. The other file. The research. Because while the expanded legal challenge had covered 11 businesses in Mapo, he's digging had turned up a pattern that extended well beyond Mapo. The same methodology. The same loan-to-ownership conversion structure. Different districts. Different names. Not just Mapo. The whole thing was much bigger than Mapo. She sat with the folder open on her desk, the single lamp casting its warm amber light across the pages. She thought about the 11 business owners who didn't know who had helped them. She thought about all the others who didn't know yet that they needed help. She looked at her phone. She had Park Jin's number. She was going to need a different kind of conversation. Miso House is still standing. But the story Kamsi just uncovered, the pattern that goes beyond Mapo, beyond one city district, beyond one corrupt director and one acquisition campaign, that story is just beginning. What she finds in that folder, what Park Jin is about to be pulled back into, and what it is going to cost both of them to do what comes next. That is part 2. Subscribe and stay close, because the next chapter drops before you're ready for it.